This is a new thing for me. I don't usually stand up in front of people. So I'm much more comfortable. I'm a speech language pathologist, and so I'm more comfortable sitting down at a table with 3.5-year-olds. So I'm speaking on hope from my perspective this morning. And a couple verses that have been meaningful for me. I pray that the eyes of your heart, the very center and core of your being, may be enlightened, flooded with light by the Holy Spirit, so that you will know the hope, the confident expectation to which he has called you. So hope has been sometimes tenuous, sometimes missing, and sometimes unexpected commodity over the past few years. We've had some very difficult experiences, and I have found hope in a number of ways. Through family, friends, through the presence of Jesus and the character of God, and particularly for me, through the beauty and wonder I find in creation. Nature is one of the ways that I become both more aware of God's presence in my life and in turn become more present to him myself. It's easy when things, thank you. It's easy when things are hard to focus on the negative, the bad, the darkness, and to turn inward. Taking the time to see, to take notice, to wonder, to be amazed, resets my focus and perspective. It draws my focus up and out of myself to see God as the maker of the vast and the tiny. I get a glimpse of his beauty and order in the patterns and laws of the natural world, and I come to know more of his character. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning with every sunrise. Great is your faithfulness. I am not placing my hope in myself or other people. We're all broken and will fail. But regardless of the situation, God will not fail, even though he may feel distant. I regain perspective and right ordering of the foundation of my hope when, in the words of the poet Mary Oliver, I remember to pay attention, be astonished, and tell about it. As I walk, as I'm outside in our garden, as I'm camping, I remind myself that he is incarnate in me, present in me through his Holy Spirit. This is the same Spirit that brought order and beauty from the chaotic void in creation. I am aware of his presence, and we share his delight in what he has made. This awareness of beauty and wonder moves me just from subjective feelings to the objective realness. Thank you. It moves me from subjective feelings to the objective realness of God in the here and now. It helps set my mind on what is true and good. I am becoming more like what I focus on. So for me, it's really a way of practicing the presence of God, and in his presence, there is hope. So I may see the first yellow goldfinch bright on our feeder. I may see silver gray pussy willows shimmering against a blue sky. I may see fern fiddleheads unfurling, scarlet oak leaves. These are patches of God-light, in the words of C.S. Lewis. Any patch of sunlight in a wood will show you something about the sun, which you could never get from reading books on astronomy. These pure and spontaneous pleasures are patches of godlight in the woods of our experience. Noticing the specific or particular points me to the greater. It helps center me in God. I am not living in denial or oblivious to pain and hurt, but my hope is in God's goodness no matter what. For example, feathers have always reminded me of God's intimate knowledge and care of me. He knows where a sparrow falls and counts the very, very many hairs on my head. I am told that he hides me in the shadow of his wings, in the midst of trouble. I find red-tailed hawk feathers when walking with a friend, cardinal feathers when digging in the garden, down feathers on the sweater of a child that I'm working with in therapy to produce an accurate S. A robin feather on the snowbank on a sad day. They are reminders of a great love bigger than myself. So I find wonder in the things that God has made, and I am made aware of his presence. And they're also a signpost or a symbol that reminds me of his character. So this is not intended to be a tree-hugging nature plug, but you will find the hope of his presence in different ways unique to you. This season, as we celebrate the incarnation of Christ, God moving into our neighborhood, may we let our wonder point us to the hope of his coming.
Over the years, my father has given me many gifts. And a couple of years ago, he said, we're done with the rowboat at the cottage, so you can have the rowboat. And then he also gave me, along with the rowboat, this. It's an anchor, as you can see. So I'm going to just kind of anchor this right here for you to kind of keep your eye on as I share this morning. And I just want to begin with a question. If you take a look at this anchor that I'm holding here, how many awards do you think this would win for its holding power and its reliability for anchoring your boat? How many people think it would be like just crash, win all the awards? No? You got that? Well, I had a little bit of extra free time this week, and I decided I would put together a short video for you, and this is of some boats that are going through a storm. So I'll let you just view this. It's about 30, 40 seconds. It's short. So I'll ask you again, how effective do you think this anchor would be for those boats that are going through that storm? You probably don't appreciate how important an anchor's holding power is until your life depends on it, right? Or the safety of your vessel depends on it. You talk to any sailor that's been through some kind of deadly storm, I guarantee you'll hear them say things like, the wind. Man, the wind was just screaming. It was just howling. It was like a jet engine. Or the waves. They were just pounding and crashing. Or you might hear them say something like this. I tell you, all we could do all we could do was just pray. Just pray that our anchor would hold. Sailors have a deep appreciation for anchors, especially if they have a really nice, expensive yacht. Have you ever found yourself in the middle of a horrific storm in your life? Your circumstances? Maybe some of you are here this morning and you're right smack dab in the middle of a storm right now. Let me share with you a second video I had to put together with all my free time. Actually, the real reason I did it was Jake told us that when we shared, we'd get paid by the minute. So here's our second video. And this is a video of anchors. You know, it's amazing, as I did some research on anchors this week, just for fun, some of those anchors each one weighs up to 30,000 tons. And some of the boats, you see the size of those chains there? Some of those boats will have 4 of those anchors, like up to 100,000 tons of anchorage to stay anchored at sea. That's mind-boggling. So today, you're probably wondering, well, why am I spending all this time talking about anchors? The theme today is that of hope. And I want us to kind of land on and focus on this one verse. Because sometimes, if you're a sailor, your anchor is your only hope. And for us, an anchor is your only hope. So let's take a look at Hebrews 6, verse 19, where it says these words. We have this hope as an anchor for the soul. Look at these words, firm and secure. We have this hope in God, that can be an anchor for our souls, so that we will hold firm and secure. And I love that metaphor. It's an amazing metaphor because it conveys the message that no matter how chaotic our world gets, no matter how crazy the circumstances in our own individual lives get, no matter who disappoints you, no matter who betrays you or leaves you, no matter how bad the economy does, no matter how bad the Leafs do, there's one thing in this life that you and I can count on all day long and through the deepest and darkest night of the soul, and that is, if you are in a right relationship with God, if we're in a right relationship with God and we have full faith in Him, and He's your anchor, His trustworthiness, His holding power, the anchor is going to hold. And I want to get right to the heart of the message today as I've prayed. Really, I felt God just wanting me to ask you one question today. Are you absolutely sure that God is the anchor for your soul? Have you settled that question in your life? Many of us here have asked Him to forgive our sins. Many of us here have asked Him to guide our lives. But what I'm asking you is, every night when you put your head on the pillow and you lie there and you fall asleep, are you absolutely sure? Can you say with total confidence that I am securely connected to God? No matter what comes my way, I have so much faith in Him. I depend on Him so much that I am rock solid sure that no matter what comes my way, I have an anchor that holds. I trust His trustworthiness, His holding power. Because if you're living with that kind of confidence, it helps you walk through life differently, doesn't it? It totally does. Whatever the challenge is throughout the day, you can hear God's Spirit, the Holy Spirit saying, God's got this. God's got this. Don't worry. God's got this. The anchor will hold. And I hope to convince you this morning, in the time we have left, the next few minutes, convince you of that. Having that kind of security gives us what the Apostle Paul writes about when he says that he calls it a peace that what? Passes all understanding. It's unbelievable. Like, how could I be going through these kinds of circumstances in my life and still be at peace? It's a peace that just passes all understanding. So I want to share with you this morning 3 storms, briefly, about 5 minutes each, 3 terrible storms that struck different people and how each of them survived because their anchor held firm and secure. One comes straight out of the Bible. One is a current story of a close friend of mine. And the third one is from history. The first one comes straight out of an Old Testament book that's named after the guy, and that is the man named Job. And I know many of you are familiar with the story because Serena preached a phenomenal message on it weeks ago. And so it's fresh in our minds. But get this, in just a matter of a few short days, almost everything that was important to Job in his life was taken away from him. Okay? Poachers came in the middle of the night, stole all his cattle. A terrible storm killed all his sheep. And then, if you can believe it, a force wind comes sweeping across the desert and just destroys the house where get this, all his 10 kids were gathered for a party. Now, I know it's a story from way back, but bring it close to home. I was thinking about this even last week with a story in my mind. I saw Jake and Julie and their 4 little kids. Could you imagine if they were in an accident and all their lives, they lost their lives? As a community, how we'd be grieving, how they would be grieving. One storm, Job lost all 10 of his kids. And if that weren't bad enough, shortly after that, Job gets this skin disease. It's so painful that he takes broken pieces of pottery and he starts scraping the skin, the top layer off his arms and his legs. He is in both emotional and physical agony. Do you remember what Job's wife's counsel was to him? Yeah. Just curse God. Curse him and die. And it struck me weeks back because as I've always heard that and read that, and I kind of thought, well, she's obviously not a very cheery gal, not the one you would want to go to for advice when you're going through a rough time, right? Just curse God and die. How's that for encouragement? But, it really struck me. I'd never seen it before till Serena, when you shared, and you said, I had never really thought that she carried those 10 kids. And she lost them. And what she was going through. That's one thing that struck me. She lost 10 kids too. I'll get this. Do you remember what Job's response was to all of that? As you read through the story, somehow Job is able to look at things differently. He says, the Lord gave me all this stuff. The Lord gave me all this, and He has a right to take it away. And then he says these words, blessed be the name of the Lord. I started thinking about that. What does that mean, blessed? That means, may it be praised. May it be revered. May it be lifted up high. May it be honored. Blessed be the name of the Lord. The Lord gives and the Lord takes away. But blessed be the name of the Lord. And Job was not making light of his losses. He wasn't in some state of denial. He was in agony, emotional agony, physical agony. But using our metaphor today, of the anchor, Job is basically saying, yes, this is a terrible storm, worse than anything I could ever imagine. But he goes, I think my anchor is still going to hold. My anchor's still going to hold. Despite all this, I'm trusting that my anchor is going to hold. I don't believe that God has just set me adrift. He's saying, I don't believe the world is out of control, so I'm going to trust my anchor. Have you ever been there? And sure enough, as you know, the storm did pass. The storm did pass and Job's anchor did hold. And near the end of the book, God rewards his remarkable faith. And he restored pretty much everything to Job that he had lost during the storms, including 10 more children and a whole bunch of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And you can bet, I was thinking about this week, with Christmas holidays coming up in the next 3-4 weeks, you can bet that around Christmas time or some special holiday, years after, I can imagine Job saying, hey, come on, gather around, kids, grandkids, come on in here. I want to tell you about this time the storm came in my life. I want to tell you about the time where I lost 10 kids who would have been your older brothers and sisters. I want to tell you about this time when I was so physically distraught that I tried to scrape the skin off my arms and legs and off my body. And I want to tell you about the storm, but I also want to tell you about what helped me through the storm. Hope. I had faith in God. God, my anchor, held. And that's why I'm still here today. And I can imagine Job saying to his kids and saying to his grandkids, now listen, what I've learned is you need an anchor for your soul. You need an anchor for your life, but you need an anchor that's going to hold in the worst of storms. And God's available to be your anchor. So kids, grandkids, trust God as your anchor. And so I want to ask you the question again. I'm going to ask it a couple of times this morning. Are you sure that God is the anchor for your soul? Do you walk around with that kind of confidence in your inner person that God is the anchor for your soul? Storm number 2, much shorter. Meet Philip. Philip's a good friend. Wayne knows Philip. Wayne has prayed for Philip. Storm 2 struck Philip, a skilled, outdoorsy, hands-on guy, loves chainsaws, loves ATVs, loves cliff diving, a passionate leader, a missionary mobilizer. He's mobilized and trained hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of youth over the years. Close friend of our family for over 30 years, and about 4.5 years ago he was diagnosed with ALS. We've prayed for him constantly as a small group over the years, and last year, nearly 100 people or so fasted and prayed for 3 days at the end of August. And at the end of those 3 days, we got together to pray for Philip for healing. But the miracle that we've been praying for has not yet happened. Other miracles have. Recently, he shared online with some friends. He said these words, "It's been over 4 years since my diagnosis. I didn't expect to make it through last winter. Wondering, is this my last Christmas? My last wedding? Yet, here I am. I've almost lost everything. mobility, speech, the ability to eat, and even breathe on my own. I communicate through eye gaze technology. But in the midst of all this, I've gained so much. Deeper relationships, affectionate friends, and love expressed through generosity, people's generosity. Someone asked me recently, what I miss most, and he said, I'm long passing missing food and mobility. I miss the little things that are huge, just organizing my shop, fixing my house. He said, man, would I ever love to rake leaves again. We had 13 guys went over one day and to clear his garden out about 2-3 weeks ago. Rake his leaves, and the only thing he other than thanks he had to say was show-offs. Picture this, he writes. Last week my kids are up before 6 a.m. All hands on deck to get me ready to get in the van so we can go to Toronto to preach at Bayview Glen Alliance Church. My son drives, and he's my attendant all day. My wife, of course, has monitored me all night, showered me, and she co-preaches with me for 3 services in the morning, back to back. But listen to Philip's faith and trusting the goodness of God in the midst of his storm. He writes this, he says, from one perspective, ALS has cost us so much as a family. But from God's perspective, I think he's smiling. We've experienced the best of community, the beauty of interdependence, the richness of transparent love. For all I've lost, I've gained so much more. And then listen to these words. His light, God's light, shines so bright in the dark. Isn't that beautiful? Friends, storms can either drive you away from God or to God. The love bonds between the members of his family have reached heights that they never, ever would have reached had they not gone through this storm. The whole family has kept their hands firmly in God's hand, and they live full on for God. And if you were to ever ask any of the members of their family if their anchor was holding, they would look you in the eye and most likely get tearful. But they would say, sometimes I feel like I'm just praying to a wall. We carry such deep sadness. Constantly asking God, where are you in all of this? We're grieving missed opportunities as a family. So much that we've lost and it's been stolen. But their message is, we don't carry it alone. Philip says, I love this, he says, I may have ALS, but ALS doesn't have me. I am hidden with Christ in God. That's his message. I'm safe. I'm hidden. As horrible as it is, I have this hope, and my anchor is going to hold. So I want to ask you again, do you have this hope as the anchor for your soul? Storm number 3. Very wealthy Chicago lawyer in the 1800s lived, and this is out of history, and he practiced his law. His law practice was in downtown Chicago, and he was living the dream. Actually, he had a lovely wife. He had 5 fantastic kids, a huge portfolio of investments all across downtown Chicago. Then one of his 5 children, the only boy in his whole clan, his boy gets sick, and sadly he can't stave off the disease, the fever that he gets, and he dies. So the lawyer loses his only son, and while they're still reeling from all this and that loss, the great Chicago fire destroyed most of downtown Chicago and almost all of the lawyer's possessions and investments. To try and recuperate from these losses, he decides his family has to get away from all of this. So he sends his wife and he sends the 4 daughters ahead on a ship to Europe, where he plans to join them on in a week or so later. He sends them off for a badly needed vacation where they can regroup, but some business loose ends had to be cleaned up on his part, and so he was going to come later on another ship. And I think many of you know this story. The ship his wife and 4 daughters were on collided with another ship, killing all 4 girls. His wife survived and sent a message back to her husband, who was still back in Chicago, and he hears the news, all the girls are gone. I'm the only one who survived. So the lawyer gets on a ship and he's going to try to join his grieving wife. And while he's on the ship and he approaches that area where the collision occurred that took the lives of his 4 daughters, he sits down on the ship in a little room and he writes some lyrics. And here's how some of them go. He said, when peace, like a river, attends my way. He said, sometimes in life things are going well. Things are smooth. Sometimes there's errors where there's no pain, there's no complication whatsoever. When peace is just like a river. It's just attending and flowing my way. Then, when sorrows, like sea billows, when the waves of disappointment, the waves of loss, when the waves of fear, sometimes there are seasons where there are huge waves that just come crashing over like sorrows, like sea billows, and they just roll over and over and over again into your life. He says, whatever my lot, whatever the circumstances of my life, God has taught me to say, it is well. It's well with your soul. Which is another way to say, in the worst of storms, I have an anchor, and my anchor is going to hold. It's going to hold. The second verse of that hymn goes like this. It says, though the evil one, though Satan should buffet. And I kind of think of that when I read that as, Satan just throwing some punches, right? A punch he's just trying to defeat, and he's trying to destroy your life. If Satan's throwing punches, though trials should come, then look at these words. Let this blessed, what? Assurance. Isn't that beautiful? Let this blessed assurance control my mind. Because our mind can play tricks on us when we're in the middle of storms, can't it? Let this blessed assurance control that Christ has regarded my helpless estate, and he shed his own blood for my soul. That's just another way of saying Christ is so trustworthy that not only has he gone to the great length of going to the cross to forgive your sin, but if he's done all that, the logic in the lawyer's head is that he's most certainly going to make sure that his anchor holds. If he shed his own blood to redeem you, and he makes a promise that his anchor is going to hold, you can count that his anchor is going to hold. You can count on it holding. So I want to ask you one last time, are you absolutely sure that you have an anchor for your soul? Because there's so many things that we can cling to in our lives. There's all sorts of alternate anchors that we can cling to. We know this, right? And I'm going to invite the worship team. You can make your way up as I just finish up here. As I just finish up talking about alternate anchors that we can have in our lives. Money, Think about it. Money is a lousy anchor. One recession, one bad investment. We think we've got enough money, and then all of a sudden there's unexpected expenses that come our way, right? It's a lousy anchor. What about this one? Popularity and fame. How's that for an anchor? You know, when I graduated from my high school, in my final year of high school, I won an award that is given to one student each year when they graduate, and it was called the Musician of the Year. And I was very honored. My picture was up in the hallway there, along with other people who had won that award in previous years. 15 years after I graduated, I got a phone call from my high school music teacher, and he said, he called and he said they just renovated the school, and he found my picture in the garbage. All the pictures got taken down and put in the garbage there. And he said, you know, I thought you might want it, so I grabbed it for you. Let me ask you this question. Do any of you remember who was on the front cover of Time magazine 10 years ago, 15 years ago? You know, popularity and fame, it's so fleeting. You get your 15 seconds, you get your 60 minutes, you get your whatever, and then it's gone. And if that's your anchor, then you're set just drifting at sea. Your career. Career, which many of us have and love and know, we know that they're fulfilling, but they're a lousy anchor. Let me ask you, where are all the Blockbuster store owners from 20 years ago? Do you remember those? Remember walking through, you could go in and spend an evening and be a date, or just walk up and down the walls and look at all the different movies, right? But our careers. You're one merger away, one buyout, one pink slip away from being set just adrift at sea. A new boyfriend, a new girlfriend. That's a cool thing, eh? Don't make him or her your anchor. What about family members? Ooh, better be careful what we say here, eh? Those we hold so dearly. They're not to be trusted as anchors for our souls, because as Jean said earlier, their lives are so fragile. Their days are numbered too. Think about it. For some of you, that person that you love most dearly will one day be taken from you, or you from them. They were never built by God to be anchors for our souls. And I think deep in our hearts, we all know that only God can be an anchor that will hold you. You can put your hope in yourself, or you can put your hope in God or yourself. Is that a tough choice? The testimony of Job, no matter what life throws at us, we have this hope as an anchor for our soul. The testimony of my friend Philip. We have this hope as an anchor for our soul. The testimony of the hymn writer. We have this anchor for our soul.